What is the current state of affairs for Demon Athletics?
I'll start by using a word that you've heard a lot, people have heard a lot recently. We are dealing with something that is unprecedented. This has not been something that is on the radar. It's not something you find in a textbook in the sports administration master's classes, but dealing with this COVID-19, the coronavirus as everybody calls it, is something which has impacted obviously our athletic program, but it's been something that has affected nationwide, not just Division I, Division II, and III athletic programs, but every business, every family, every citizen, and even worldwide. As far as NSU athletics, the Southland Conference announced on this past Saturday, March 7th, that all spring sports competitions would be canceled for the remainder of the semester, and that would even include something that might have been played after the semester ended, like the postseason baseball tournament. The conference also voted, and this was with the recommendation of the athletic directors and the approval of the board of directors, the president of each of our 13 institutions, also voted to have no team functions whatsoever, whether it be practice, team meetings, things of that nature, up until March 30th, and then to evaluate again where things stand at that point. I think when we sent the release out on Saturday, the Southland Conference did a release, and then each university did their own release as well. I think that there was something like 20 out of 32 Division I conferences had completely canceled competitions, and pretty much everybody else had at least canceled them to a finite date. But since that time, most Division I conferences have completely canceled competitions for the remainder of the spring. And so at this point, we are in the week before spring break, and the campus is very empty. Classes are going to resume on Thursday of this week online for a couple of days, and then next week, the week of March 23rd, is spring break, and then we'll resume on March 30th and see where we stand from there.
Talk about the difficulty of and the process of the decisions that had to be made.
For weeks leading up to when all these decisions had to be made, we've been hearing about the coronavirus starting on the West Coast, obviously overseas. But it seemed like once, about the moment that I arrived in Katy, Texas for the Southland Conference basketball tournament, our team was going to compete on, I think it was Wednesday, March 4th would be the date. And I had no sooner arrived in Katy, and I got a communication that they wanted to have a athletic director's teleconference at 4:30 that afternoon, and the decision at that point was made that we were going to play the tournament, but starting the next day, that Thursday, it would be with very limited fans in the stands. And from that point on, the decisions were just rapid fire. You almost couldn't keep up. You almost couldn't hardly make an announcement. You almost couldn't hardly inform your department before an updated decision was made. But I think these decisions are made in the best interest of everybody, and I know that's extremely hard to accept. It's difficult, it's disappointing, but I want to credit right from the top Dr. Mark Emmert and the NCAA, and they've got a job which a lot of times is thankless, because they're whatever they do, there's always going to be questions and criticism, but I think that they took the lead. I also think when I'm sitting there Wednesday night after our first round game when we beat Texas A&M Corpus Christi, and you hear that the NBA has canceled their season, I think that also had an immediate impact. And then from there, the decisions got made very quickly from that next day, canceling the entire Southland Conference tournament, and we were pretty much one of pretty much every other conference in the country to do the same thing. And then the decisions came all the way down to the point of where we canceled our spring sports competitions. And it's something that honestly, and I think the quote that I put in our press release was, with all my heart, I was hoping we would not get to that point. But I think you've just got to, you've got to look at the ramifications. You've got to look at the greater good. As much as sports are so much a part of everybody's life in this department, and it's a big fabric of our society, right now it's got to take a distant second seat to doing what we can to control an outbreak, a virus which potentially could impact just a huge number of lives, and already has to an extent. I saw something recently where it said that when all this is said and done, we all may have not quite the right idea, or we may not really know if we did too much, but if it turns out badly, we'll know right away that we didn't do enough. And I think that that is the mindset that everybody has to have, starting on a personal level and then expanding out to our coaches and staff. And I know this sounds cliche, but society's got to have that mindset.
What has been the reaction of both players and coaches?
As one might imagine, there's an extremely high level of disappointment, and once again, it's very, very understandable. I think that initially there was an announcement that said that competition would be postponed until after March 30th. Maybe in some ways that was a little bit of a blessing, because maybe it helped kind of, to use a phrase, break the fall that eventually was going to happen a couple days later when competition was completely canceled for the rest of the spring. But my heart goes out to our student athletes, especially. They work so hard. They have a finite time to have a college career, and especially for our spring sports athletes, student athletes. And just as an aside, and once again, it's irrelevant at this point, but man, every one of our spring sports teams were off to a tremendous start, and I was extremely confident that those teams were all going to make a run at a conference championship. And I don't say that lightly. I say that knowing the landscape, knowing who we had, and knowing the rest of the conference. I feel like we were going to have just a fantastic spring sports season. And you even back up into the basketball and the indoor track season. I mean, the men's basketball team goes to Katy for the first time in 5 years, and they have a tremendous win over Texas A&M Corpus Christi, down in the first half by 14 points, and they go on a 26-1 run, which is our play-by-play guy, Patrick Netherton, says that's, to use the word again, that's unprecedented. He said he's been calling our games a long time and never can remember a 26-1 run. You go to indoor track and you've got Jasmine Steels, the defending national champion in the indoor long jump, and doesn't get a chance to defend her title. It's crushing, it's devastating. But I will say this about our coaches and our student athletes. If you look at the things they posted on social media, it's been about disappointment, but it's also been about being thankful for what they had, being thankful for their teammates, being thankful for their coaches. And I think that's the message that we wanted out there. And I had every confidence in the young people. I had every confidence in our coaches. And I want to say for our coaches, they sink so much time and so much energy into their team, into their student athletes, and to preparing them to be successful both on the field and off the field. So this is a tremendous blow to our coaches as well. And our staff. You show up at a ball game and there are so many things that most fans don't realize. They weren't there 3 or 4 hours before, but our support staff, they put those things in place to actually just make sure that the event happens, and enjoy doing it. It's what we do for a living, and we signed up for it. But I feel very, very strongly about the emotions that they're all going through. And we have had for the last 3 years a mental health committee in our athletic department, and we are very much tracking on our student athletes. We've talked to our coaches about being sure to stay in touch with your student athletes. Right before doing this interview, actually, I texted some student athletes on each of our teams, and I just said, hey, how are you doing, and what are you hearing from your team? I think that's very, very important, and I need to be, as the athletic director, asking that same question to our coaches. I need to be communicating with them. I need to be communicating with our staff. I know that this is a period of social distancing and isolation, but there's still a way to communicate. There still has to be a way to connect and a way to outreach to them to make sure that they're doing okay through what obviously will be, or has been, the most difficult time of their either playing career or coaching career.
Has there been talk of getting eligibility back for the players?
The minute that spring sports competitions were starting to get canceled, I think the Ivy League hit the first domino, and a lot of conferences followed, including the Southland afterward. There were immediate questions and there were immediate comments about how unfair this was, and truly it is, to the spring sports student athletes. And once again, to credit the NCAA, this was so evolving, it was so fast moving, and I thought they did a great job with trying to keep up with the dynamics of it. And they already announced that student athletes, whether they're a freshman, with a lot of time to play, 4 years, or it's a senior playing their last year, that they will be able to have another year of eligibility in the case of spring sports in 2021. Now, there are a lot of factors that have to be hammered out to make that happen. It's going to happen, but as an example, the first thing you've got to determine is who wants to come back and maybe who can't. I mean, we've got student athletes right now that have been accepted into physical therapy programs and doctoral programs, and as much as they'd love to have one more chance to play their senior season, they're probably going to move on, but then some others are going to come back. But then then you have to weigh in that we've already signed in those sports student athletes from high school or transfers that are going to come in. So with the situation you're going to have is you're going to have to adjust roster sizes. There's no doubt that in most cases you're going to have to adjust roster sizes. The scholarship costs are going to be more. To take softball as an example, we may be funding 12 scholarships right now, but between the student athletes that want to come back for that extra year or the student athletes that we've signed, we may be paying, as an example, for 14 scholarships. And at NSU, we've already talked, and we're committed financially to do whatever we need to do because in light of these circumstances, it's the right thing to do.
What is the athletic staff doing while there are no games?
Well, there's certainly limitations as to what can be done, whether it's by the coaches or the staff, but at the same time, to use the old phrase, there's still work to do. I mean, I'll take our coaches. The NCAA has put a recruiting ban on until April 15th. You can't go watch prospects play. You can't bring prospects on campus. It doesn't mean you can't continue to communicate with them. And I think that that's going to be very important. Once again, that connectivity is going to probably be even more meaningful now to those prospects than it has been in the past. And as far as our staff, we actually had an external staff meeting this morning, and we talked about some things that have to be done in terms of just updating websites. We're going to do some special recognitions for our seniors who won't be returning. We've got a plan that I won't say much about it right now, but it will start to push that out on our website and push that out on social media. We're winding down, but we have been actually in the process for the last month of looking for a new head women's basketball coach. And there have been several staff members, several other people that have been involved in that process. And so that's ongoing. And honestly, for me personally, that's the fourth hiring process that I've had to coordinate in the last 7 months or so. And so I will be very glad to put that behind and hopefully not have to deal with another hiring process for quite some time. But there's always things to do. And once again, as I mentioned previously, as athletic director, something that I've got to continue to do is just stay connected to our coaches, our staff, and our student athletes. But we're already thinking ahead. I mean, I think right now, the human nature thing to do is to think about the moment and think about the fact that we don't have games. But I think we've got to be thinking ahead a little bit. We've got to have some vision. Things like our June and July football program. Are we going to be able to do that? And if we're not, then what are we going to do? Our summer bridge program in July for our incoming freshman student athletes. If we don't do that, can we do that virtually, or is there a way we can still do that to help them make an adjustment? We've got fundraisers scheduled, our annual Don't Die Wondering golf tournament in early August, our volleyball dig fest in early August, things of that nature. And once again, nobody knows how far-reaching, how far out this coronavirus, the pandemic is going to go as far as limitations and things of that nature, but we've got to be having those conversations right now as well. So I guess in a nutshell, there's still plenty to do. There's still plenty to talk about. Obviously, what's important also is we want that our coaches and staff have a comfort level that if they need to work from home and they can work from home, we want them to do that because that's what's most important is taking care of themselves personally and taking care of their families as well.
While the situation has been difficult on everyone, what can we learn from it?
I think you learn something from everything in life. I really do. Even the things that you don't enjoy, the things you don't like, the things that are difficult. You just stop and think right now about that softball player. And I'm sure if you ask each of them right now, they'll be able to tell you exactly, probably the count of their last at bat. The last strike that they threw as a pitcher. As a track athlete, their final throw, their final jump, their final time. As a tennis player, their final serve. Same thing for baseball, the pitch, the hit, the at-bat, whatever. Because in some ways, if you think about it, for many times through the years, student athletes have no idea that it's going to be their last game because they're going to suffer a season-ending injury. And sometimes it's a career-ending injury. So in this case, especially for the student athletes whose careers are going to end and they're not going to be able to come back for whatever reason, I think it's the proverbial, you don't take anything for granted. And I think that's the lesson that goes way beyond hitting a softball or a tennis ball or a baseball or running a 60-meter dash. I think it's a real good lesson in terms of enjoying the moment, being appreciative of the opportunity you have, and relishing the people that are around you. And I say that not just in terms of our student athletes, but I'm preaching to myself right now. Because I'm driving through this campus and I'm not seeing very many cars, and I appreciate the faculty and staff on this campus. I'm still seeing a lot of coaches and coaches and staff and a few student athletes. But the other part of it, we talk all the time in athletics about how athletics teaches you to overcome adversity in life, and this is just another way to do that. We talk about how student athletes are resilient. These are things that I put into reference letters all the time. That is, Division I student athletes, they know how to be resilient. They know how to overcome adversity. They know how to have great work ethic, discipline themselves. The self-discipline is very important right now. We have student athletes that while they may not be here, while they may not be competing, they are still on scholarship. They still have continuing ability to meet the underclassmen, especially if they want to compete next year. So now you're home, which is where you feel you want to be and probably ought to be, but at the same time, all of our classes are online. Are you disciplining yourself to make sure that at the end of this semester you've made your grades and you're eligible to compete next year? So I think once again, in a nutshell, the things that we say are so special and the traits and characteristics that really will carry us through the rest of our lives, our student athletes, I think this is another opportunity to live that, and I have every confidence that they're going to do that.
What are your thoughts moving forward?
My thoughts moving forward are, this has not been easy, and it's not going to be easy for a little while. How long, I don't know. I think I saw something in the past day or so where somebody, I think it was a fellow AD, made the comment that we're past the time of denial. I think for a little while, maybe a week or two ago, you kind of heard about it, but we're way past the point of denial. So I think we have to accept the circumstances. I think we've got to make the best of the circumstances and move forward with the idea that as difficult and tough as this is, there's things to be gained from it, there's things to be learned from it, there's lives to be saved by it more than anything else. And the 2021 year is not that far away, and God willing, and I'm praying that that's the case. We're going to have a great enrollment next year. We're going to have a fantastic fall sports season, and we're going to look back on this and realize how difficult it was, but also realize that, as I've said several times, together. Nobody's going to do this individually. We've got to do this together. Our student athletes have to do it together with the support of their coaches. The coaches have to do it with the support of the staff. The student athletes need to support their coaches. I think that sometimes gets overlooked as well. So I think there needs to be a lot of give and take to help us get through this. And once that happens, I think we're going to be fine, and we're going to move forward. And just want to say that in closing, that my thoughts and prayers continue to be with those on a national and even international level, the loss of life, the illnesses, the impact that this has on families, and then closer to home. I have very special sentiments, very special thoughts for everybody associated with our athletic department, our coaches, our staff, our student athletes, our fans. I mean, I know right now there's a hole in the lives of our fans, and they understand why that hole is there, but that doesn't make it any easier. But once again, as I've said over and over, we're not going to get through this individually, but together we will handle it. So it's great to put this message out there. My phone line, my text, email is always open if anybody wants to reach out to me. And in the meantime, as always, fork 'em demons.